Welcome to the Coach's Table Podcast, where coaches come to grow personally and professionally through real-world application and online education. What's going on, everybody? Super excited for this podcast today. I have a guest with me that is extremely intelligent, that is awesome, that is also extremely fit, and his story is really cool, and I think you guys are really going to get that. But before we get to him, if you get a couple of things from this, if you get educated, if you get entertained, please do me a huge favor and subscribe this. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment. Would much appreciate that. If you're on Spotify, do me a huge favor and share this with one other person. That's the only way that the show grows. Without further ado, Mr. Will Ratelle, what's going on, brother?
What's up, man? How are you doing?
Great, man. How are you?
I'm all right, man. Just another day.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know Will, if you don't know Will, I think you're living under a rock. But for those of you that don't know, Will was a college football player, went to the pros, went to the NFL, and then was always the best guy in the weight room. And if you've listened to the podcast before, you've heard not only myself but other guests say at times the best guy in the weight room may not be the best player on the field, right? And I think we've all seen that as coaches. But, unfortunately, Will's not playing on Sundays anymore, even though, I think he probably could still play on Sundays. But after that, he got into strength and conditioning and has been training athletes ever since. And he is an animal himself. If you look at him on any sort of social media platform, you'll see that the dude is absolutely strong, fast, can jump, and just under 6 foot, but can freaking dunk more than people that are 6 foot, in all honesty. So tell us about that, man. Tell us about, college football, the NFL, how that all kind of came about.
Yeah, so where I currently work is the University of North Dakota. This is where I went to school. So I played football here. I played from 2011 through 2015, and then moved on to the NFL. Signed with Atlanta as an undrafted free agent. Got cut after preseason. When signed with Kansas City, they cut me. That kind of had this 2-year kind of in and out career in the NFL and CFL. And so this would have been spring of 2018. I had just gotten cut from Saskatchewan Roughriders, and I was kind of in this, I was a free agent in the CFL. Was kind of negotiating contracts with different teams in the CFL at the same time. Yeah. So I had a good relationship with the strength and conditioning, my strength and conditioning coach at UND. There was a job opening here. He basically just offered it to me. And so I kind of had to make this decision of keep pursuing football or grow up, get a real job, and move on with my life. And so that's what I did. Yeah. So fortunately, I didn't even have to really interview for the job here. I mean, it's like anyone who's in college athletics, it's more about who you know than what you know. So I was really fortunate that there was just a job opening when I kind of needed one. And so I've been here since 2018. Currently work with football players, softball players, tennis players, and golfers. Used to work with men's basketball, volleyball, and some other teams, but we had some things kind of switch around on campus here, and now I'm with tennis, golf, and softball, and that's what I'm doing. So that's what I'm doing on campus. I also teach here on campus too. I basically teach it's basically just a CSCS prep course for the university. Sure. It's pretty laid back, really easy on my part, and then I got my online stuff. So try to post what I would call very unscientific but more practical knowledge around training. I try to stay away from talking about eccentric rate of force development or stuff like that. I want to keep it more practical, and just more useful and less cryptic, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I do. So you have this online program, or online programs, I should say, because it's more than one, Launch 0.0, Haas program, which are phenomenal, by the way. So first of all, where can people get those, and what is the purpose of each one? Because they are different. So what does that look like? Yeah,
so Launch 1.0, I don't know if I want to say this on here. I don't really necessarily agree with a ton of things that I put in Launch 1.0 because that's almost 3 years old now.
Sure.
I just don't – I mean, it's all good stuff. I'm not going to say it's bad stuff, but there's some there's some premises within the program that I don't necessarily think are super important anymore. But yeah, you can it's more explosive-based, jumping-based, sprinting-based training program. It's 9 weeks long. It doesn't have an ebook, but it does have a few pages of kind of outlining principles and methods of the program. And then we got the Haas Project, and then I have Haas Olympic. Those are essentially the same program, except one of them includes Olympic lifting, but basically, these have ebooks, so they go into more depth on the principles of the program. But basically, if you want to get big, strong, and fast, those are the programs for you. And they're basically the same thing. They're not the same, but like the principles behind them are the exact same. So yeah, you can get them on my website. Go to my website through my Instagram.
Yep.
It should be pretty easy to find if anyone is interested in them.
Yeah, and if you go on his Instagram, you're probably going to spend a lot of time on there prior to clicking on his link, because his videos are absolutely fascinating. With whether it's a lateral squat of like 200 kilograms or 100 kilograms, or it's him doing just absolutely insane amount of weights for Olympic lifting, or just really anything. It's actually very fascinating. It's very eye-catching, whether that's intentional or not. But that's the way that he trains. Like, legitimately, that's the way he trains. He doesn't just do that one thing and post it. And like, he honestly trains like that. I've trained with Will before. He's an absolute animal. So kind of, I'm actually interested. You're very big into basketball. You're very big into dunking. Us short kings, if you will. Just kidding. But Will and I, we're not 6 foot, right? So how does somebody that wants to dunk, that's not 6 foot, that, whatever, because 6 foot's kind of like a good spot where like you should be able to dunk pretty, easily if you've trained at all, because of your arm reach and your natural height. But for you're doing, 360s, you're doing, windmills, you're doing all sorts of stuff. You're not just rim grazing, like you're actually like throwing it down. How does that come about for you? Are you naturally elastic like that? I mean, you're freaking jacked, so you're very muscle based, but you also got bounce. Like, how do people get bounce like that?
Yeah, so it's going to be like the approach is going to be different for different people.
Yeah.
I'll just speak for myself. I'm not a very elastic person. I'm a much more like muscular driven type person when it comes to producing outputs.
Yeah.
But so I made a YouTube video about this because I get questions all the time. Like someone will say like, "Hey, what's something I can do to get better at dunking?" And so like, I can give kind of the sarcastic kind of like sleazeball answer, like, "Oh, we'll just go dunk more," which is true, but like at the same time, the person asking kind of already knows that probably, and they probably already are doing that. So for someone who is kind of like in this position where they want to get better at dunking or jumping with an approach, or being just like more more elastic, I guess, more athletic. So like then point B, so point A would be just go dunk more. Point B would be sprint more, which most people, if they want to be athletic, probably already are doing, So then point C, where I'll give my answer is, what you want to do is you want to get better at carrying your speed, like your horizontal velocity, and turn that into like a vertical displacement of your center of mass. And really it comes down to just getting more comfortable at doing that, which is going to be bounding variations, just doing approach jumps with various constraints around the task. A lot of bounding, single leg bounding, even just doing approach jumps where the goal isn't necessarily jump height, but the goal is to just not slow down before you jump. Those like that's even if you're jumping over like a 24-inch hurdle, which is really easy. But the goal is you gain speed with your approach and you don't slow down. You maintain that speed as you turn that horizontal, to sound like more intelligent, horizontal velocity into vertical displacement of your center of mass. Really just don't slow down. Get better, get more comfortable at carrying speed into your jump. And there's various ways to do that. Like I said, bounding is a really good example, or even just doing various approach jumps, coming off different arcs, different angles, shuffling into it, whatever you can really think of. So that's kind of my answer to most people when they ask that kind of question.
Yeah, because a lot of people, probably aren't dunking enough or attempting to dunk enough, right? And with that, like when you're carrying the horizontal velocity or the momentum of it, right? Like it takes a certain level of strength to be able to transition that into the vertical component, right? And that's where a lot of people lack, is that component of it, the penultimate, if you will. and they don't know how to transition it because they're probably just not strong enough in a lot of times. And that skill that's required to do that component from a horizontal to a vertical, they probably haven't really trained it ever. A lot of them will just train a vertical component or just train the horizontal component and not combine the two, and therefore like they can't ever do it and they slow down, or like they're not comfortable on one side of their body, whether it's a left foot approach or a right foot approach, and they just suck at it, right?
I think a lot of people, like where a lot of people would go wrong, and I went wrong with this before, is, well, they think they need to like jump better or jump higher.
Yeah.
And then like that thought process kind of leads them to, well, I should do more counter movement jumps. I should do more counter movement jumps with weight, like loaded jumps.
Yeah.
Or I should do more seated box jumps. And it's like you're missing the primary component, which is having some horizontal speed into the jump. Because your standing counter movement jump is probably good enough as it is,
Sure.
But you need to turn that into more of a relatable task to dunking a basketball. Sure. Unless you want to just dunk off of a counter movement jump, which is cool if you have the ability, but I don't think most people really care that much about that. So.
Right. And it's not really practical unless you're just doing it by yourself with nobody there. Like if you're actually playing pickup, the chance of you getting just a regular counter movement jump without somebody there guarding you is pretty slim. You might get one, right? It's pretty slim, but
you might get an offensive rebound uncontested, and then you can go back up, but that's unlikely.
Yeah, exactly. So, speaking of loaded jumps, there's this amazing debate that everybody loves, and I know you love this one as well, but like Olympic variations, loaded jumps, what should we do? Should we do one? Should we do the other? Should we do none of them? Curious of your thoughts. I know we've had this conversation before, but everybody and their mother loves to talk about this one topic, right?
Yeah. So I've made a few videos on this topic, even though I reject the topic as a whole, but I'll operate within the framework for a little bit.
Sure.
I don't think they're comparable, loaded jumps versus Olympic lifts, because the tasks are so different.
Sure.
In one task, the loaded jump, the goal is to just project your center of mass or project your own body mass vertically.
Yep.
Whereas the task of a clean is to direct and redirect an external body of mass from point A to point B, which is from the ground to like the front rack position. Mm-hmm. So they're completely different tasks. So of course, like the motor strategies of performing them are going to be different. Right. But so what I find people, where I find people kind of go wrong in the way they think about this is they want to look at the output, and I guess I haven't looked into the research too much because I don't care that much.
Sure.
But people will cite research studies that say, like the peak power output of a loaded jump with 50% of your 1RM is higher than like a heavy clean, which could be true. I don't really care because I don't care about the power output. I care about the stimulus that's being placed on the body.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about the entirety of the movement, the entirety of the task. A loaded jump is one, I don't want to say long gradual acceleration, but one steady gradual acceleration, right? Yeah. Whereas something like a clean, you have the first pull, there's one segmented acceleration, then you have the second pull, there's an even higher impulse of an acceleration for the second pull, and then you transition under the bar into the catch, there's another impulse right there, and then you have to accelerate the bar back up as you bounce out of the hole in the squat. So you have like this 4 segmented task in a clean, whereas a jump is really just one, because it's not like in a trap bar jump you have a first pull and then a second pull. It's just one gradual acceleration, so you don't really get that same pop, for example, with a trap bar jump or a barbell jump or a dumbbell jump as you do with a clean. So in that way, these two things aren't even really comparable either. There's so many more things that I'm struggling to think of right now that are different between the two. Mm-hmm. And then even just like So you can clean if you're a competent weightlifter,
Yeah.
which you could argue some are, some aren't.
Sure.
How do you define competence or whatever?
Sure.
But for me, I can clean on any given day 180 kilos on a really good day. Like my best ever is 195 kilos. I can't jump with that much weight. So like because the tasks are different, the absolute loads and the relative loads are not something that you can't compare. You can't say 30% of your trap bar deadlift, take that as your trap bar jump load that you're going to use, and then somehow compare it to 30% of your 1 rep max clean. Right. For me, 30% of a 1 rep max clean is like something I could muscle snatch.
Yeah.
You know, so like I can't take both loads and be like, oh shit, well, I produce more power with the trap bar jump at the same load. Well, it's like no shit, because if I really try to produce as much power into 30% of a 1 rep max clean, I'd pop myself in the chin with the bar.
Say,
I'd throw the bar. I'd throw the bar through the roof.
Yep.
So like you can't compare the loads, whether it's the relative load or the absolute load. So so I hopefully that answer sufficed. There's so many more kind of variables we could talk about within this discussion that I just can't really think about off the top of my head. But
yeah, absolutely. And I know.
Oh, I got one more thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen coaches talk about like contact prep, tissue prep for contact sports.
Yeah.
And again, I reject that you can train that in the weight room. You know, but if you're going to operate within that framework, you cannot say that a heavy barbell that is landing on you at 9.8 meters per second squared.
Yep.
Because that's gravity, right?
Yep.
You can't replicate that doing anything else in the weight room.
Right.
That's more of a contact prep than anything else in the weight room. So like, I think it's crazy when I see like, yeah, we're doing this for contact prep or tackle prep. Like it's so gay. You know,
I love it.
I reject it outright. Yeah. But if we're going to use that type of term,
sure.
Catching 170 kilos in a clean in a front rack, it is closer to the demands of hitting someone in football than anything else.
Yes.
It's just dumb.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I, we've had this conversation before, but like everybody talks about, and we don't need to stay on this topic too much longer. I just think it's so funny, but everybody talks about the skill acquisition component of the Olympic lifting and all of its variations and why athletes don't need to be doing it because it doesn't really translate to sport, yada, yada. But like nothing in the weight room really translates to sport. So like general preparation is the best preparation. And it doesn't mean I don't take this stance because some people are like extreme one or the other. I only do this or I only do that, right? Like I don't really take that stance. I think all of it, both of them are tools in your toolbox. And there's a time and place to use them. Now, if like my athletes just aren't coordinated and they've never done it before, then like maybe I don't do that. But if they're like, hey, we've done this before and like we like it, cool. Like, why would I say no to that, if that makes sense? Like, if you like doing that, awesome, great. If you don't, great. Like, we don't have to. I don't need to try and put like a freaking square peg into a round hole. And the skill acquisition component, like none of my athletes are Olympic weightlifters. So like, yeah, the only skill that would transition to that would be Olympic weightlifting. So the skill acquisition component is just like so void to me. It doesn't even make any sense. Like in the classic, like you don't use it because you can't teach it. Like it's not that difficult to teach, right? Like I hate that. I think that's so dumb, but you can get into the ins and the outs of it. Like if you want to get super detailed, it becomes so much more technical, obviously, but like for the general athlete, you know, you give 3 or 4 freaking cues and 9 out of 10 times, like it's hitting pretty well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to touch on the skill acquisition thing.
Yeah.
But I forgot what I was going to say about it. Okay. Here's one other point. This isn't about the skill acquisition thing.
Sure.
But you think about, we were talking about the tasks of a loaded jump versus an Olympic lift. God, now I forgot where I was going to go with this too. Sorry, dude. I forgot what I was going to say about that.
No, you're good. If you think of it later, we can get back to it. I know you're.
Yeah.
But something that's interested me recently, and that.
Okay. Sorry. I remember.
Go.
So I'm not opposed to loaded jumps. I do them all the time, and I have athletes do them all the time.
Yes.
Here, my issue with the loaded jumps is mostly along how it's rationalized.
Mm.
If you think about loaded jumps as just jumping, you're just getting better generally at the task of jumping. So I think I've talked about this on another podcast, but have you read the Kelly Starrett, what was it, Supple Leopard book?
I've
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know the book. It's super thick. It's like 1,000 pages. I've skimmed it. I haven't read it word for word. Absolutely not.
So, and I haven't fully worked out this thought yet. I'm still working on it.
Okay.
But so in the book, he talks about, I think he calls it position. It's either position or movement archetypes, where it's like the squat pattern has these certain kind of like principles or positions that you have to hit in order to get what he would to fit his criteria of a squat, or is like the hinge or the lunge. I think he calls it position archetypes.
Sure.
Well, that's kind of how I think about like different tasks. So there's like the jumping archetype, or the task archetype, jumping archetype, in which a jumping archetype would be projecting your center of mass through an explosive action. Yep. You have like the striking archetype, which would be producing force into an external body of mass, striking. Then you have like the sprinting archetype. You have all these different kind of these task archetypes as well.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So people will comment back to me that, I hate loaded jumps, or like, which I'm not. Yeah. I just think the rationalization of like, well, we're getting better at producing high power outputs in this middle zone where that, like, we can get into that later.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm a proponent of jumping. I'm a proponent of jumping.
Yes.
Go jump.
Yes.
The more jumping, the better. You can jump in different ways. Loaded jump. You're not training to get more powerful. You're just generally getting better at the task of jumping. So
with an external stimulus, like with an external weight,
Yeah, it's a constraint. It's a constraint to the task of jumping. Correct. Where like Olympic lifting, I guess you could throw that into like the striking archetype, where you are producing force into an external body of mass to move it in this like 3-dimensional space, so that you project that external body of mass from point A to point B.
Right.
So yeah, I have more on that I could probably ramble on and probably not make a whole lot of sense on right now.
Yeah,
but that's just kind of another thought about it.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. It's the classic debate, the yin and the yang, that just use both, and understand why you're using both and have a rationale on why you're using both. Cool. Awesome. Next topic, right? Because that's so you've made actually a couple of post videos about two things, and we can start with one and then go to the other. One, and I'm interested, VBT, and your thoughts on that, because I know you've had some interesting thoughts. And then the next one is rotational power. So whatever one you want to attack first, I particularly don't care. It's interesting, both of them. I'll just give it to you.
Okay, so for the VBT one, is there a specific post in mind? Do you have can you quote it, I guess?
You just I think you were saying how like the numbers for the VBT are just kind of made up.
Are fake?
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Like how you're just kind of like, you just threw numbers in there and didn't really so talk about that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so talk about that.
Yeah. It's really just like the categories
okay.
of the VBT. I'm sure you've seen all like
the
different
thresholds
tables.
Of them. Yeah.
Strength, speed, strength, accelerative strength, starting strength, optimal power, all these things. These outputs are all determined by the load itself.
Okay.
So like if you're attempting to improve your accelerative strength, and I'm kind of making up the numbers as we go because I don't have it memorized, but you're trying to improve your 75% on the bar to 85%. That's supposed to be accelerative strength, and moving it at, 0.6 meters per second. You're trying to get that to move it from 0.6 to 0.7. You're shifting the curve, right?
Yep.
You're just you're playing around with an individual's force velocity profile.
Correct.
Right? We have no confidence in saying that if we make that force velocity curve more linear instead of less linear. We have no confidence in taking you see me, this end of the curve to this end of the curve. We make that more linear. We have no confidence in thinking that the extreme points are going to improve in themselves. We also have no confidence in thinking that if we make it more linear, that when they're in a sports competition without any load, except for like shoulder pads or something, that has any relation to what they're doing on the field.
In regards
it's
to
just it's bullshit. It's made up. So okay, let's just say you take someone's curve and they have some sort of, follow my finger here, and they have some sort of deficit where it's no longer going at this angle and now it drops because they have a deficit here, and then it flattens out. So now we take that, and that becomes that. You just like change the middle of their force velocity profile,
right?
So okay, like that doesn't mean anything. You didn't change it. You didn't change the endpoints.
Sure.
And really, it's the endpoint down here that matters for sport.
Yeah.
Because unless you have shoulder pads on, you're not facing any real external load except for when you have a collision with someone, or like a baseball bat, which is how heavy is a baseball bat? 2 pounds? I don't know.
No, 32 ounces.
It's ridiculous.
Ounces, 36 ounces, something like that. Yeah.
And again, I'm also not saying you shouldn't play around with these different loads and velocities. I'm saying the rationale behind it is poor and flawed, and it doesn't hold any water.
Yeah. So for you guys,
these are just made up. These are just made up categories. I think I saw someone say, like, if you improve your speed strength zone, that's going to be what's like related to your ability to finish the last 20 meters in a 60-meter sprint, something like that. Like, he related starting strength is your first 10 meters, accelerative strength is 20 to 40, and speed strength is your 40 to 60, something like that. It's like, no, because I guess I don't have that good of a reason why, but I think the burden of proof is more on the person making that claim than for me just not accepting it as a blanket statement.
Sure. Yeah. So for you guys listening, let me, for listening or watching. Okay. So a lot of what Will's takes are on may not be about the concept itself, but about people's rationale behind it. Right. So like for those that train in season, and Will trains athletes currently. And I think, well, a lot of people will say like, well, in season, I use VBT to ensure that I'm getting vertical integration to make sure that we're hitting all of our qualities based off what sport doesn't provide and, all that stuff. And I think you would agree with that stuff and be like, okay, cool. Like if we're not getting max strength in sport, then we probably need to hit max strength, or if we're not getting speed strength or strength speed or whatever else. But what you're saying is the rationale kind of behind the zones, if you will, or the thought process of if I improve all the zones, any point on that force velocity curve, it's actually going to increase sport performance. And you're kind of saying like, I don't know if I agree with that because there's really no basis behind that. Is that accurate?
I'd say that's pretty accurate. Yeah. I don't know if I would change much of what you said. Yeah.
Thanks. I try to sum things up well, but okay. Another one, because it's interesting, and maybe this is the same thought process for you, but rotational power. You made a great post about this. I was very intrigued. As somebody that's worked with baseball athletes before, I just had an in-depth conversation yesterday with a strength coach who is in the private sector and works like with baseball athletes. And then we got to talking. It's like, damn, almost everybody's a rotational sport athlete. Like if you look at, tennis, if you look at volleyball, if you look at basketball at times, if you obviously look at the sport of baseball, and then, quarterbacks, like there's a rotational component to almost all of that. And, everybody wants to train rotational power. Obviously we talked about the hips a lot because that's where we know everything is, the center of everything. And like, if you're going to be strong, if you're going to be fast, if you're going to do a lot of things, it's going to come from the hips, obviously. So very curious, interested on your thoughts on this rotational power.
Yeah. So there's a few different angles we could kind of take to it.
Sure.
So,
like,
how
is
many
it
different
a
types
thing?
of how many different types of power is there? Isn't there just power?
Okay, so yeah, power, but power is plain specific.
Power is the output.
Power is the output, right? But
power is the output.
But it's plain specific. So I always laugh when people are like, "Oh, I'm doing it's funny to me. I'm doing vertical power, and that's gonna increase my horizontal power. And it's just like, no, it's not. Like, power is plane specific. If you don't train it in a specific plane, like if I only jump and I'm working on my vertical power, that's not going to translate to me hitting a baseball. It's just not going to happen, right? Like, I'm still
So
going.
I would reject all of that. So
Really? Okay.
power is just the output.
Yeah.
Now, okay. So how many different types of power is there? Isn't there just one?
Yes.
Like if we're gonna say there's vertical power, we're also gonna say there's horizontal power. We're also gonna say there's rotational power. It's like genders. How many fucking genders can we come up with? Like how many types of powers is there? Could I just make something up and be like, this is I don't know, this is 47-degree angle power.
Sure.
You know what I mean? We're just putting adjectives in front of power. Power is already a thing. Power is already the output. Now it is context specific. Yes. So if you are competent, if your sequencing in the activity is a high quality sequencing in the motor pattern, the power output's probably going to be pretty good. So that's kind of one angle I take to it. Another thing is, how is it measured? So there was a study done, and again, take this with cat. Like I don't put a lot of emphasis on studies because I think most of them are fake and dumb and poorly designed and poorly ran because they're done by grad students. I was a grad student once. Yeah. I teach at the university. The students I teach are fucking idiots. Yeah.
And a lot of them I think are flawed and biased too, right? Like a lot of them are trying.
They're just bad.
Yeah. Like
they're just overall bad and not reliable. But anyways, so there was a study done, and this is something I looked at when I was in grad school because I had an assignment and I had to justify. I had an assignment in in a kinesiology, like a program design class. Yeah. And my the sport I was programming for was softball. Mm-hmm. And so I had to justify every exercise I choose, every load, every intensity, every set rep scheme, all these different things. So this is a group project, and partners in my group wanted to look at like rotational medicine ball throws. Yep. And so we did find a study that looked, and I want to say it was an EMG study. So it looked at like activation of different muscles. Yep. Rotational medicine ball throws. So the inter and intra reliability and consistency was so poor. Dude, it was so poor, not reliable at all. If you and me both performed 10 reps right next to each other of this rotational medicine ball throw, every single rep that I perform, rep 1 to rep 2 to rep 3, all the way to rep 10, was going to be performed differently. So there's no consistency in technique. You can't standardize it at all. Sometimes I'm producing more force with my left glute as I'm rotating to my right. Sometimes it is my torso rotating and producing more force there. Sometimes I'm relying on my shoulder to actually throw the ball. And then if you looked at your 10 reps, all 10 of your reps done are going to be differently too. So there's absolutely no way of standardizing this movement. And then, so there's another way to look at it. Then, so if we talk about standardizing the movement, how much rotation must occur for one to say this meets the criteria of rotational power? How fast does the rotation have to occur? What degree of rotation has to occur? There's all these different, at what joints does the rotation have to occur? What if I have more rotation in my left hip than in my thoracic spine? Like, what if my left hip rotates a shit ton, but my thoracic spine stays stiff? And you know what I mean? Yeah. You're still completing the task of throwing the ball, but it doesn't meet a certain, a standardized criteria of movement quality for it to be considered rotational. Like, you perform the medicine ball throws one way, I perform the medicine ball throws one way. Who's going to sit there and say, well, this is rotational enough, we'll call this rotational power? Sure. I mean, even if you look at someone dunking a basketball, one of those hips is going to internally rotate in order to jump. But people don't consider that rotational power. Sure. I don't know why. There's rotation occurring at the hip. There's also some rotation occurring at the spine because you kind of twist and you like load up.
Yep.
But when people talk about rotational power, they think baseball players, because to like the naked eye, you can see some sort of rotation occurring within the task.
Right.
Even like Olympic weightlifters, there's rotation occurring at the hips as they pull and snap under the ball. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So like, you can't define how much rotation is needed, what degree of rotation is needed, what joints need to be rotated. Like I don't know. I'm kind of being redundant now.
Yeah.
I have more to this too, but I just can't think of it on the spot as I'm going on this rant.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's one more thing. So I got into an argument with some guy on Instagram about this. He was saying I'm wrong. So who produces more rotational power? A pitcher who can throw 90 miles an hour versus Tiger Woods, who probably can't throw 90 miles an hour, but can outdrive the pitcher.
Right.
You know, who produces? How are you going to take one of those things and say Tiger Woods produces more rotational power than the pitcher? When if you put them in the other, you switch them in their sports, and they both probably look like unathletic individuals.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like we're taking this rotational power as this like umbrella term.
Sure.
And we're shoving baseball players, golfers, tennis players, volleyball players under this umbrella of rotational athletes. And I just kind of think it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Because
and I'm not saying don't do medicine ball throws.
Right.
I think medicine ball throws like that provide some value, especially in just like they provide some movement variability that still has some semblance to the going back to task archetypes, the task archetype of throwing, which you could define throwing as producing force into an external object that is already connected to the body to project it away from the body, I guess. I kind of made that up on the spot, but the throwing archetype, doing throwing activities, probably has some value in movement variability. You know, like you're just don't say you're getting better at rotational power. That's fucking retarded.
Sure, because of the notion of you can't define it, and it's so context specific. Because yes, I agree with you. Like, and it doesn't even have to be baseball players or golfers. Dude, take a football player and ask him to play basketball. Right. And like, it's just a matter of like the skill acquisition, the task at hand, or ask a football player to go swing a baseball bat. It's actually really funny. You see this all the time. You see all these, and I love it because it's cool and it's fun. Like all these Power 5 schools, they'll do like a home run derby, right? Or just schools in general with their football team, kind of like as, before the season, because it's fun, it's competitive, all that stuff. Right. And if you actually watch them, do you realize how many of them can't even freaking hit the baseball bat or like hit the baseball?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because like they're seen as like these super athletic individuals in the context of their sport. But the general person doesn't recognize that because they just think that like because they play X sport, they're the most athletic individual. And it's like put them in the context of baseball because they can't hit the ball. Put them in the context of playing volleyball and they can't do that. Go ask them to shoot a free throw and they're going to airball it. And it's actually super funny. So if you take the component, the thought process of rotation, like you said, and say a baseball pitcher to a golfer, is going to be different because the context and the skill is different, clearly. Now, just for shits and giggles, a lot of baseball players do play golf, obviously, because it's a fun sport. Everybody loves golf. But like what you're saying is the notion of you can't define it in a multitude of contexts, let alone what degree of rotation, let alone some of these other things to say this is training rotational power. Whereas in the context of Olympic lifting, you can define like this is what an Olympic lift is, right? And this is what makes it one. Or this is what a back squat is, and this is what makes it a back squat, regardless of the context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I made a YouTube video about this probably like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago maybe. And I think in the video I used the example, like I work with softball players.
Yep.
Like they can throw a softball faster than me.
Yeah.
But to say that they can produce more power than me is foolish.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, so if you're going to, well, these athletes, they can throw, we're going to use exit velocity of a throw to determine rotational power. Well, it's like, well, you're not actually measuring power, you're measuring velocity there. Because what if I produce more power, but
and less velocity.
But the angle in which I'm producing that power is a less efficient angle to project the ball. Mm-hmm. I'm still producing more power. Just the motor sequencing is flawed.
Is off.
Is poor.
So
like, that's why the outcome is different.
Right. Okay. So here's a question for you then. Based off what we were just talking about and saying that and we're just going to use this example of rotational power, but every movement is different. So there's a level of like movement variability that occurs, obviously. Like every time you do a clean, every time you do a snatch, it's not the exact same, even though it may appear so. There's a different level of movement variability with that. So could somebody use that then to say, well, obviously you can't have the same, if we use the example of sets of 10 in a rotational med ball, the movement variability with the left glute med or the right glute med firing more a component of it coming from the shoulder or more torque from the midsection, we could just chalk that up to say, well, that's just different movement variability, right?
Yeah, so my answer would just be no. That gap is just so much different, so much smaller with something like a squat. So, yeah, my answer would just be no. And of course, there's a degree. Of course, there's a degree of variability with everything that you do.
Yes.
But the gap is just so much bigger with these so-called rotational movements.
Sure.
Compared to something as simple as a back squat. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not even close, not even comparable. Yeah. That's total red herring.
Because I'm sure, I asked that because I'm sure that other people will just chalk that up as that, right?
Right. People will. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think they're being intellectually dishonest if they do.
Yeah. Or maybe they just don't want to dive into it because then potentially they might have to admit something that they don't want to admit.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So the way you structure your training, I think is fascinating. It's such a simple approach and it produces unbelievable results. So talk to me about that. I know you do very hey, we're going to do 3 big things. We're going to sprint. We're going to do something metabolically challenging and that's it for the day.
Yeah, that's really it. Now when I program for my athletes, it's different because there's formalities that you kind of have to go through.
Yeah.
There's administrators and coaches you have to please, and so I go by the book a little bit more with the athletes on campus.
Sure.
And it's also a little bit different for me compared to most people. I am more physically developed than most people, and the stress level that's needed for me to realize an adaptation is a lot higher. Mm. And compared to if I just pulled 600 for 11 reps last week, where most people can't deadlift 600 for 1.
For 11,
so the stress level.
11. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the level of stress for me to realize an adaptation is so much higher. Therefore, I can't do as much because the fatigue that's going to come with the stress. So putting all that aside, the principle is still kind of the same for everyone. Mm-hmm. If you just do something heavy, let's just say on a weekly basis, if you hit all of the major muscle groups, mm-hmm. you do something heavy, you do something for a decent amount of reps. Yeah, you challenge your aerobic system or all these different energy systems to synthesize ATP in different ways. You challenge your range of motion in a variety of ways. If you hit those things, I call them the minimums. Yep. I'm sure you've seen my posts on hitting minimums. Yep. If you just do those things consistently, maybe do one of those things on a weekly basis, you're probably good. And so that's kind of the way I program. I do have a Train Heroic. It's called Haas Concurrent. I got 40 some members in there right now. It's pretty fun group. We just all there's not a lot of shit talking, but we all just kind of update each other on training and send videos and stuff. So that's how I program in the Haas Concurrent, because I kind of assume I program in Haas Concurrent on Train Heroic, assuming that people do have a decent enough background to where it can be open-ended enough where they're going to make good decisions, and they are physically developed enough where I don't need to like check all these different boxes.
Sure.
Like here, we're going to pull heavy. We're going to squat heavy once a week. We're going to do some Olympic lifting. We're going to go sprint. We're going to do some jumping, and we're going to do something that's going to challenge your aerobic system once or twice a week. And that's kind of how it is. Like each day there's like 3 or 4 things. Start off by doing 10 minutes of jumping, jump over a hurdle, challenge yourself, see how high you can jump. Second thing, we're going to squat heavy. Third thing, we're going to hit heavy. Now we just hit all the musculature of our lower body that we really care about. Last thing, let's just go get a pump with, I don't know, your hamstring pump. We're going to do heavy kettlebell swings for sets of 20. I don't know, whatever it is. Or we're going to go get on the assault bike and do some aerobic work on the assault bike. I don't know. That's pretty much all it is. Do a few things, do them consistently, vary up the way that you constrain the environments and how you approach the tasks, and you're going to be in really good shape, I think.
Yeah, and train hard. I think that's one that people miss.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you actually have to strain. Like you can't just fucking I'm just going to do what I've always done. Like you actually have to strain, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, last couple of things here because I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got to go. Okay, so online training. Should people do it? I'm a huge advocate of, we have a skill set that I think a lot of people can benefit from, especially being a strength and conditioning coach rather than a personal trainer. Should more coaches do online training? If so, how should they kind of go about that? How can they grow their audience, grow their income, things of that nature that you've learned? Because, you seem to do pretty well from that standpoint.
Yeah, and so one of my biggest regrets is I didn't start earlier. I'm sure you've dealt with like imposter syndrome, which like when I first started putting stuff out on social media, I definitely had that imposter syndrome feeling.
Yep.
Like I followed guys like Jake Tura and Jump Science and all the guys out there. Look at their following, and then what was crazy is I would see a post from Jake Tura, and now like I'm pretty cool with Jake.
Yeah.
I consider him a friend of mine now, but like I'd see a post from him. And it's something that I thought about like a week before. Yeah. It's like, fuck, like I know, like I'm on Jake's level, I guess, in some areas. I should start posting shit too.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, absolutely. Go post stuff. How to grow your following, or like, I don't really know, man. You get lucky. Sure. Be consistent. Yeah. I guess 2 things that I think have helped me a ton is, one, just looking the part. Definitely helps because that gets eyeballs. So like, there's not many 5'10", 235-pound guys that can 360 dunk. So like that helps. So if you can physically do things that are impressive, put it out there.
Show it too.
And then 2, at least for me, I try not to be like a scientific guy. I try to just be like very practical in the way I communicate my message. So I think like, at times I've tried to cite research in YouTube videos and Instagram posts, and like, I don't think most people really care about that. Maybe some do, but I've gone away from that stuff now, and it's just, a lot of it's honestly conjecture. Like I take a concept or an idea, and I just kind of give my opinion on it. And obviously it's still like science based or principle based. But I just try to be really concise and practical with my message.
Yep.
I think those 2 combined have really helped me. So yeah, that would be my answer. Go for it.
Yep.
Try to be consistent too. Don't post once a week. Post once a day.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think looking the part is a big deal too. I think that helps. Like, it's funny. When I was in college, I was working as a personal trainer, right? Playing college football, still, making a buck, trying to make $1. And I had like the personal training director, right? It was really funny. And he was fat, like fat, right? And he was just like, nobody cares about what I look like. People only care about what I know. And I'm like, well, no, like you can't even, like, how are you going to get clients if, that's so inverted.
Yes. People care more about what you look like than what you know.
Correct. And it was just like, well, like how hypocritical of you if you're telling these people to eat right and do this training, but like you're not even doing it yourself. Like that doesn't even make any sense to me. So it was just really funny. Like when he said that, I was just like, and I'm never listening to you again, because like,
Yeah.
like it was just wild. So, okay, so with that, ebooks, you think ebooks are the best thing for people because like it's easy to read, it's simple. I know like your first one, Launch Point oh, was an Excel sheet, and we talked about that. And you're like, yeah, it was okay, but the ebook is probably way better, like in a Word doc or something of that nature. And I've found the same thing. Like I've done Excel sheets with people too, and it's just like I don't know how many people actually utilize them. So when they see them, they're scared of it, or if they just use it all day, every day, they don't want to look at it anymore. And at times it can be like too confusing for people.
Yeah. Are you asking from a coach's perspective on how to like
Sure.
build a business with it?
Yeah. So like if I was a coach, right, and I was like, man, I want to do online training, like the format, I guess, whether it's a Train Heroic app, I think is probably really good too, or Team Builder, whatever else, or if you're just going to sell an ebook, right? Like maybe the
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for anyone else what's going to work for them. The ebooks have definitely been most successful for me.
Sure.
But I also think like it starts with the social media stuff.
Yeah.
Because I have 20,000 followers on Instagram now. If I only had 2,000, I wouldn't get the same amount of sales. I just wouldn't get the eyeballs. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on like what other strengths or weaknesses you have, I guess,
Sure.
or what else you got going on in your life.
Yeah. It's very individualized. For me, who has the what am I don't know, almost 27, which is really still like really small following. The ebooks work great compared to an Excel sheet. In all honesty, that works way better.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, just it's easy for people to read. They can just the Excel sheets are just like too much for people, I guess. But any last thing to wrap up with, thoughts, something you're working on, something you learned?
Something I'm working on. I'm working on a launch 2.0. I don't know when that's going to be out because I want to be at least somewhat strategic about when and how I release it, and I guess how I like advertise it or whatever.
Sure.
I mean, it's done. I'm kind of waiting. So I mean, things I'm working on that, I guess, trying to grow the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And just the social media stuff. That's it, man. I got the Train Heroic thing. Just trying to grow that. Yeah. I don't have much of like a strategy to it. I just if I think of something that I think is worth sharing, I'll share it. If I can't think of something that's worth sharing, I'll just post a video of me squatting a lot, and then
people love it.
Somehow good.
And they love it.
Yeah, so man. That's it. That's it, man.
That's awesome. One last question: are you big on growing an email list? Like, do you think that's really important?
I am not. I don't know. I know Jake has one.
Yep.
I don't have one because I hate getting spam emails.
Yeah.
Like, you know how when you buy something, like, I don't know, like I bought something from Shields or Best Buy and Target and Foot Locker or whatever. And now I'm on their email list, and it's like 3 emails a week from like every day I open my email and I have 30 emails from some store that I like gave my email to, and now, and then it's a hassle to unsubscribe. So you just delete it every day. So I'm not big on them. So I probably don't know if I'll ever do that.
Sure.
And I guess maybe I'm different from most people, but I assume most people will get an email and just immediately delete it. So it's kind of a waste of time. Sure. But I don't know. Yeah,
I just didn't know if you were from a aspect of like if you're doing a new launch, right? Like with Launch 2.0 or a new program or whatever, that you would launch it with the people that have purchased from you first and then go to social. So then I just communicate all that through my Instagram. Yeah, you do. Yeah. So cool, man. I don't have anything else for you, brother. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Appreciate your friendship. And this was good. It was solid, and I look forward to having you on again and chatting with you here real soon. Where can I find you? Yeah, thanks for having me. Just search my name, Will Ratelle. You'll find it. If you search it on YouTube, you'll find it. Instagram, you'll find it. I have Twitter, but I just use it to follow politics. I don't ever tweet. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Awesome, bro. Well, hey, appreciate you. Thanks, man. We'll talk real soon. Sounds good.